Hi,
Yeah,
Sean. Can you hear me?
I'm constantly amazed when technology works.
Good morning, good day, and good evening to you and around the world.
Oh my goodness. And what a big day it has been. It is 5 p.m. here in the east on the east coast of Australia. What time is it there for you?
Oh, it just hit 9 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, you've got a full DLD day ahead of you. How lucky.
Well, tell me, how was it so far?
Oh, it's been busy. I've actually, for the first time ever, I've actually not worked on a DLD day today. So I've had the whole day of just being online and looking and sharing and talking to people. I've had a couple of little meetings of things to catch up around DLD day activity. So it's just been lovely to have time to stop and enjoy it. It's great.
Sounds good.
Yes. Now, I was going to suggest perhaps I would actually, what I might do is I might introduce myself because I didn't do that in my previous live event, and then talk about why we're here today. For those of you who I haven't met before, my name is Sean Ziegenfuse. I am the co-CEO of the DLD project, as well as being very, very lucky to be a member of the RADLD International Committee. And my role throughout DLD Day has been to help organise connections with amazing people from all around the world, because this year's theme is DLD around the world. Vivka, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what your connection to DLD is?
I surely do. Well, Sean, I have to thank you for having me on this special day. It's really an honor. So yeah, of course, I introduce myself. I have qualified as a logopedist, logopedin, as we say it here in Germany, which is an SLP, speech language pathologist. That was in the 90s. And today I further qualify clinicians and conduct research as a professor of logopedics. So my academic specializations are child language development and speech, language, and communication difficulties in multilingual children with migration or refugee background. I also serve as a vice president for communication of the International Association of Communication Sciences and Disorders, IELP or ILP, where our mission is to improve the quality of life of people affected. And consequently, it's my pleasure to support a campaign like Rattle as part of what I think is absolutely necessary. And I'm pleased to see that we share common objectives that are in line with the United Nations SDGs and the WHO's, the World Health Organization's vision of health for all.
Amazing. And it's so great to be able to connect, because as we've been learning through our theme of around the world, is that everybody's at different points of adopting this terminology, which is really important for us to consider. Is it doesn't necessarily mean that we're all going to be running the same race, and our races all look a little bit different. So perhaps you've already mentioned that you're in Germany. Can you tell us a little bit about terminology? What term do you use? Do you use DLD, or is there another term that is utilized in your language?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. We are not really on the, well, we are not running the same race, or maybe we do sometimes run the same race, but we might not be on the same race track. So yeah, that's right. My home base is Bremen, the northwest of Germany. And before I give you an impression or an idea about the use of terminology, let me tell you that in my country, the healthcare and the education systems are strictly divided. So in comparison to other countries, logopedists do not provide services at schools on a regular or legal regular basis. And this is what contributes to a different understanding and use of terminology among professionals. However, we just conducted a survey to identify what terms we actually use. And we found that we find the use of a common terminology absolutely essential. So actually, there is a term that literally translates to DLD as language developmental disorder, which is a little bit different in the word order, but literally is the same, which means Sprachentwicklungsstörung. The abbreviation is SES. However, one of the results of that survey, that one survey I just mentioned, was not to use the equivalent of DLD according to its meaning in English, but apply the term DLD in a much broader scale. That is, and that's different to DLD in English, German professionals would not differentiate between DLD and language disorder, and therefore, with respect to the use of the exact term, they would not differentiate DLD from other language disorders that are clearly caused by certain conditions. So that's a difference, or that is different, and therefore we need to also raise more awareness on those difficulties that often go unnoticed. As for DLD in English, there is actually no visible cause, and this is one of the reasons why we highlight DLD Day as well.
Absolutely. And I think it's been great to connect now. We were talking in Auckland at the IELTS World Congress around, uptake in terminology. We were very fortunate to have a presentation accepted.
That was great.
And it was, of course, amazing to get to touch base in real life and discuss these things, because actually it's that realization that language and the languages we use actually often drive the way in which we work, and the systems that we work in drive the way that we work. And so we have to consider both language and cultural context to kind of formulate, well, what is it when we mean people who have difficulties communicating for no known reason? And so Germany's, utilizing this in a slightly different way. So it'll be really interesting to see how that sort of unfolds for you, because it's relatively new. I don't know if I might have missed that bit, but did you mention what date, or what year it was that you reached consensus?
Oh, that was, well, the consensus is like, those 70%, and it's really difficult to reach consensus. Actually, it was just published in a German magazine, and I got a good announcement it will be published in English as well. So you might be able to follow the current status and the different terminology we use. And it's really good to be in touch and read and compare. But this might also have, from a researcher's perspective, an influence or an impact on how we receive and appraise research, because it might be different in terminology. It's really good to have that on mind.
Now, you've already touched a little bit on this next question that I have for you, but I'd love to hear more. Why do you think celebrating DLD Day is so important for you?
Well, Sean, it's exercise. Celebrations get noticed, and I think that great celebrations make some noise, and great celebrations often become a tradition. So I hope for all of us that this helps to stimulate more recognition of DLD today and in the future, to finally improve the lives of those with DLD by allowing for early identification, which especially accounts for multilingual children, and establishing and ensuring access to services. All this needs common efforts to enhance cooperation, and celebrating together, to me, seems like a good start for a common achievement.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to say that it is celebrating, that DLD is often unknown. It's often considered, an invisible condition. But we often will see that it's communicated in a way that there are challenges and difficulties associated with it. And what we're really starting to see moving forward is that DLD, and I can see somebody's already taken the words right out of my mouth, that it makes people unique. And we want to celebrate the wonderful things that it is that DLD makes us, and also the fact that it's a difference, and that with the right support, people with DLD can really thrive. So I think celebrating that is so important.
Absolutely.
So how are you celebrating DLD Day today? What are your plans?
Well, it just started, and across the German-speaking countries and regions such as Austria, Liechtenstein, Luxembourg, Switzerland, and Germany, of course, there are several activities going on, such as spreading information about DLD at universities to students, mainly at departments for education. providing a telephone hotline and local small events where students are asked to share information. More personally, I took this year's motto seriously, literally. A few weeks ago, I traveled around the world, chatted with different people of different age and different backgrounds from different cultures and languages about DLD and our mission. So along with some fantastic colleagues at IELP, we just launched a reel on that on social media. Maybe you've seen that already.
I have. It was wonderful to see, and see all of the beautiful pictures of people with DLD awareness posters, you know, all around the world, and really showing that we're bringing people together. And that's one of the wonderful things that I love about being involved with Rattled, is the fact that whilst I can sit in Brisbane, Australia, and have my own local experiences, being involved in an international campaign like DLD Awareness Day means that we get so much more and more broad perspectives on things. And it makes me think about, well, actually, you know, what does it mean for the person with DLD in France or Japan or South Africa, and how are we all meeting their needs, not just you know, the people that are working with them, but as a big group of people that are passionate about DLD from all around the world. How do we come together and support them no matter where they are?
Yeah.
Now, can you tell us perhaps something, and you've been traveling a little bit this year, so you might have a few things, but can you tell us something new or interesting about DLD that you've learned in 2023?
Sure, I can. Yeah. Maybe two things. I sadly had to learn that approximately every second multilingual child in Germany is falsely identified, misallocated, and many multilingual children with DLD still go unnoticed. They're identified quite late, if at all, or that language difficulties related to mostly to vocabulary or grammar are still associated with growing up in a multilingual environment. So I had hoped for that we would have actually overcome many of the misbeliefs already, those misinformation in misuse of norm-oriented tests on multilingual children that contribute to that situation. However, I have also learned how rather competent and confident clinicians around the world assess for DLD in multilingual children. On behalf of the Multilingual Multicultural Affairs Committee of IELP, we have published our worldwide survey on assessment of DLD in multilingual children. The results are quite interesting and may provide us with better guidance for the future. For example, I falsely anticipated that one of the greatest challenges to assess multilingual children for DLD would be lack of tools. But actually, it's rather about access and about acknowledgement of structural barriers of access to receive information and to receive services. So now that we know, it's actually something we can change, which is great. But we need to take on the responsibility to work on that. And I think a campaign like Rattle can really, really contribute to that.
Yeah. I'm constantly think about the fact that where I live in Australia, we have access to free interpreter services, which for me, completing a multilingual language assessment is just a phenomenal asset to have. But without them, you know, the burden of payment for that service, or perhaps not including that part or consideration in my assessment, is a really big challenge, and perhaps maybe even a big barrier for people who would benefit from having language, you know, all languages spoken assessed to determine if maybe DLD is the right fit for their needs.
Yeah,
now,
that's really an asset.
Yeah,
we don't have that everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I constantly think about, you know, what is it in my local context that enables me to do something? What's a facilitator, or perhaps what's inhibiting me as a bit of a barrier? Now I'm going to ask the next question, and then I'm going to quickly grab my cable, because all of a sudden my device has gone from 20% charge to 2% charge, which worries me.
Okay.
But my next question for you is, what supports are available for people with DLD in Germany? What does support look like for them?
Well, support is provided by logopedics. See you in a minute.
I'm
Logopedics
here.
provide, oh, good. Logopedics provide service in the healthcare system, mostly in private practices. But families need a referral from a physician to make an appointment. That is, access to service is a bottleneck. So we miss providing logopedic services at schools. Following some structural changes almost 2 decades ago, Germany had reduced or even closed schools for special education. So it's a little bit different, the supports. It's mainly in the healthcare sector. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And then thinking about, I guess this is possibly, you've possibly already touched on, talking about children, but then what about adults? Are there any services available for adults in Germany, or is it private again?
It would be private again. And actually, when I hear, we are doing some cooperation with teachers and at schools, and they mainly say that their adults or even adolescents really miss access to those services. When it comes to dyslexia, yeah, there is something, but DLD and the other profession is rather unknown yet. So this is also why we need this campaign.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the constant realization of the fact that children with DLD will become adolescents and adults with DLD, I think one of the flow-on effects for perhaps our consistent and persistent rattled efforts will be that, children will be being diagnosed and eventually they will grow up. And I'm really looking forward to the future of having amazing adults with DLD who can come alongside us and provide that advice and guidance and lived experience that sometimes is a really bit tricky to find, or we're relying on the same few people who are really happy to put up their hands and give that advice. So I think we've got a really exciting future, which leads me beautifully into my last question for you, which is, what do you hope to see in the future for DLD in your country?
Well, if I could make a wish,
Yeah.
a much better access to clinical service.
Mm-hmm.
And as a prerequisite for this, a better understanding that early identification is key, which needs better interprofessional cooperation. Yeah. And this could be established with a legal and early service of providing or allowing logopedics to serve in kindergartens and schools.
Yeah. So getting in early, providing that support, and hope that by doing that we'll set them up for better success in the long run.
Yeah. That would be great. And we are really working on that. And some support from other countries, good models, would be helpful. And we are also citing that. But it's really difficult to get this through. It's also very political, as you might know. Yeah.
Yes. I was going to say, what can I say that's fair, but I think what I'd say is my learning after many years now has been that there has to not just be a social benefit or a cultural benefit, but often has to be a financial benefit. And so I constantly come back to the supports in schools and people in incarceration and literacy that impacts on employment and ongoing disability funding that's needed when we don't provide those supports, but still, it's often the right place, the right person in the right place at the right time. And when you crack that nut, I'd love to hear about it because I haven't gotten there just yet.
Yeah. Well, let's work on that together. It's all about cooperation and
exactly.
Go
from there. Now, do you have any final thoughts or messages that you'd like to share before we wrap up our live event today?
Well, I think that's pretty much it. I'm really thankful that you drafted up the theme of around the world, and I'm really looking forward to get in touch and really broaden the network on all colleagues who are interested to just clarify those misbelief and misallocations. That would be great. And yeah, I would also love to see a lot of colleagues in IALP, the International Association of Communication Sciences Disorders, and help to raise this issue. And yeah, that's about it, actually. I think
a great way to finish.
That's all for today. That would be great already if we could achieve that.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We've had 2 live events so far already today, with 3 more scheduled with my wonderful colleague, Chantel Mayer-Crittenden, who's going to be joining from Canada and talking to 3 more amazing guests. So please keep an eye out if you can join in those conversations as well. Otherwise, the recording of our live event will be shared on our Facebook and Instagram channels very, very shortly.
Amazing.
So thank you everyone who joined us.
Amazing. So greetings from the other side of the world.
Exactly.
And have
enjoy your
fantastic
DLD day.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye everyone.